Hello, everyone. We're back again in front of the church administration building to explore the harm coming to the members of the Latter-day Saint Church through policy, through harmful policy. Today's subject is the harm brought to the LGBT community within the church because of the harmful policy found there. For me, obviously, I'm not of that community, so I know I'm not going to be the absolute best advocate for this topic. But I know that people are being harmed. I know they're being harmed by this topic. So I knew it had to be included in this week. So with that, I'm going to do the best I can to represent that topic. And if anybody else wants to come down here and share their experience with a more personal viewpoint, then we are welcome to come on down. It's right in front of the church administration building, right across from the Cedar Creek Mall. But anyways, really my journey started out is simply not knowing the truth on this topic. I grew up as a young man going through, are we doing okay? Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. I grew up as a young man, normal Mormon boy, starting out in the deacon's quorum, and these subjects were brought up, and the only thing I ever heard about the LGBT community or people of that is that they were sodomites, and that it was a sin next to murder. That's the only message I ever heard growing up. And I trusted the church leaders. I trusted my prophet, my seer, and my revelator at the time that was true. That these people there's no mismatching of bodies. There's all kinds of comments that were made. And I trusted that without doing any discovery on myself. I was a lazy learner on this topic for most of my life. A lazy learner. But a tragedy happened to my life. You know, I have a son that I lost to suicide, 14 years old. And in that journey, I had to go find out why he made that end-of-life decision. And if I was to narrow it down to just one topic, which there's several contributors to that decision, but if I had to narrow it down to the heaviest contributor, it would be that he was being called faggot almost every single day in the months before he made that end-of-life decision. And I went and did all kinds of research. It's in his chat logs, and that's where really how I realized that. It was in his chat logs. It's in writing. With that, I had to do some soul searching. I wanted to understand why he made that end-of-life decision. And while doing that, I was in bed. I could barely get out of bed. I went and I read every teen suicide story that I could read. Every single one. I searched the internet. I was almost fanatical to read as many stories as I possibly could. And the one thing that kept coming up over and over and over again in the teen suicide stories that I read was use of the word faggot to describe the victims of suicide, these young victims of suicide. And a partner to that word is the words hoe and slut. The female suicide victims were called that often. So I come to understand just how harmful the use of that word is. I lost a son to that word. And I know a whole bunch of other people have lost their child to that one word. You know, with that knowledge, I came to you, President Nelson. Well, maybe not you directly, but some of the brethren, a couple of the brethren, apostles, I sent letters to. And I asked them to directly make the use of the word faggot a serious offense. I didn't get any response back from that. I'm just confused. You know, the children in your church, the church that you lead, are dying because you're being called faggot. But you know, I know another young man. I was a scout leader growing up, and he came to me and he told me, Brian, Brother Bresee is what he would have called me. He said that while he was at church, he was kicked and he was called faggot in the halls. And he said he wanted to go home and kill himself after that experience. So the stories are endless. So I'm asking, President Nelson, I'm going to ask you again, will you make the use of that word a serious matter? Because it is a serious suicide contributor. It just is. Abuse is not acceptable. It never is. It's not acceptable to Christ. With that knowledge, I wanted to understand the LGBT subject further, as I did a lot of research. And, people would tell me there's science to back it, and there's science why people live those lives. And I didn't believe them because I believed my prophet, seer, and revelator. I thought that was crazy. There's no mismatching of bodies. And I was a lazy learner. And I didn't bother to go and explore the science behind that. I trusted my prophet, seer, and revelator. And what I found is there actually is a lot of science backing why people live LGBT lives. It's in their body. And I think the first start of that exploration is I read stories on young LDS children who, young men that described their experience. They shared their story. And I read as many of those as I could find. And what I found is these men they weren't happy with the situation they were in. They didn't want to be gay. They were trying to pray out the gay is what I kept reading. And they came from very good Latter-day Saint families. So it couldn't have been environment. They were told their entire life that it's a serious sin next to murder, and it's sodomites, and that's the reason why a whole city was destroyed. And they got all those messages, but still the power upon them was a same-sex attraction. I think the church has came a couple of steps on this. They're at least acknowledging that people have a same-sex attraction. But it's just not enough. It's just not enough. We need to talk about the science behind this. Did you know what I found is the hormonal levels found in the mother's womb has a huge impact on the sexuality of that child once they're born. If they had a smaller levels of testosterone, it's more likely that they're going to have maybe same-sex tendencies. The other thing I found is that there's serotonin levels in the body have a huge effect on people's sexual attraction. They did all kinds of studies, and what they found is that often men with serotonin issues have a much higher sex drive, which leads them to homosexuality. So these are the bodies people are born into that have these problems. People were all born into different bodies, different life experiences. President Nelson, just because you've not had that experience, you've not been in one of those bodies, doesn't mean it's not very real, that there's a real suffering, people wanting to pray away the gay, and it's just not working. Often, at least from my research, and there's obviously those that are going to know more than me on this, but I know that there are those who prayed so hard to pray away the gay, and it never went away for them. It was inherent in the body they were born into. It never went away. So, because they felt like their prayer wasn't answered, when they tried to pray that away, there was no God there to help them in their minds and their experience. They lost their belief in God. There was nobody there to help them in their darkest moment, in their mind, darkest issue, according to the church. So it leads to other problems